Running 100 miles seems impossible, and maybe even kind of crazy. And it is, but we believe in big crazy dreams. That's why we ran 100 miles. It was such a life-changing experience for us, we decided to devote this podcast to preparing and inspiring you to run your first ultra race.
Are you ready to feel the highest highs and the lowest lows? Are you ready to do what you once thought was impossible? Are you ready for your trail to 100? Thank you for joining us here on Trail to 100, the podcast made to help you finish your first 100-mile race. Today, we had a special experience. That's right, I said we. I had my father-in-law, Marc Callister, on the podcast to talk about his first 100-mile race, which he ran this past October of 2024. But as well, with me, I had my beautiful and lovely wife, Melody, join me to help co-host this episode. For you Trail 100 diehards out there, Melody is one of the founders and original co-hosts of this podcast. She did 5 seasons of it with me. She's even hopped on a couple times here in season 6, but she's made a little step back here with this start, but happy to have her back whenever she wants to be on. It was great to have her back as we kind of had a little family get-together podcast as we were all able to be there on Marc's 100-mile race and see him finish his first 100-mile course. So, if you have not, though, I would encourage to get Marc's full story to go back and listen to 2 additional podcasts that we've done with Marc. The cool thing about this podcast is through the years of Trail to 100, we were able to talk to Marc after his first 50K, and that was in season 3. The title of that episode is Redefine What's Possible, season 3, episode 14. So if you want to hear his beginning story of how he started into running, go back and listen to that and how he went from never running to running a 50K. And then the next year, he ran a 50-miler. And so in season 4, episode 26, we talked to him about that. It was called Do It Anyway, where he had a real struggle on that 50-miler. Kind of crazy story. His race got canceled halfway through the race. He was halfway done, and the race got canceled because of a ride-out blizzard. So then he had to figure out how to get that 50-miler in, and he did it on his own self-supported style in the blazing heat and crazy conditions. And so you can check that out to hear how he made the next step from 50K to 50-miler. And then here in season 6 now, we were able to talk to him about his 100-miler. So no, that's a long introduction, but I think it's a cool setup and story that you can see Marc through the years literally progress to 100 miles. And that's what this podcast is about. It's most of the time, it's not just I'm going to run 100 miles, boom, 6 months later, you're running 100 miles. Some people can do that, but most of it cannot. And you will get injured if you try to do that. And so Marc went through this whole process of, 5K, half marathon, 50K, 50-miler, and then 100-miler. And it's just really cool to be able to now go through each one of these episodes and see his journey. He's our first one that we've done, right? We've had on multiple times and seen the whole journey from step 1 to 100 miles. So anyways, I'll stop babbling. It was a great conversation. We were able to talk to Marc in person, and there's just always something special about being physically with one another. So hope you guys enjoy it. So let's get to it. Marc Callister. Thank you for joining us today here on Trail to 100, the podcast made to help you finish your first 100-mile race. And today I am joined by my beautiful and lovely wife, Melody.
Hey, guys.
And that's right. It's a special episode. So
it's good to be back.
Yep. Glad to have you back, Melody. I've missed you through the last.
I've missed it too. I'm starting to get a fire back for the podcast and running. It's just been a second.
Does this mean some possible more appearances from you?
Totally.
Possibly. That's great news. But as today, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see that we are in our Trail to 100 studio, aka the basement of our house.
AKA our mini gym.
Yes, we've rearranged our treadmill and gym equipment to make this room. And I am joined here in person with my father-in-law, Melody's dad, Marc Callister. Thanks for joining us.
Grateful to be here. It's been excited to get on and talk about this last run. So.
Yeah, we've been wanting to make this happen for a while. I've mentioned it. I think I've mentioned your run in almost every podcast recording that I've done. And this sets it happen. You just ran your first 100. We're recording this December 26th. Merry late Christmas to everyone. Hope you had a good one. But you ran your first 100 in, what was it, mid-October?
Yeah, October 18th and 19th.
Okay, so we're a few months removed, coming up on 3 months removed. But anyways, I was able to be your crew chief and be out there seeing you, and it was a special day, and we wanted to do this in person, and I'm already getting emotional.
Yeah, me too. I'm starting to flash back to those days. It's
Thinking about it. It was a special day, and so that's why we wanted to do this in person, because it was just such a great family experience.
Absolutely was.
I was just going to say it was a special 2 days. I feel like we always talk about 100-mile race as if it was one day, but it feels like one day. But
it's one continuous day.
Yeah.
Anyway, so Marc, for our listeners out there, let's just go back to your decision to run 100 miles. When did that happen that you decide I'm going for it?
It's a good question, because I think that when you start out running, you kind of have those little milestones where I remember telling Melody years back that if I could just run a solid 5K, then I'd be happy with myself, right? And then and you know how that works. And it's like, well, I better do the 10K, then I better do the half, then I better do the marathon. And so I think that probably in the back of my mind, it's been since I started running, I think in the back of my mind, I always knew that I would take a stab at it at some point. But I made the actual decision in the previous year when I had a chance to pace somebody that was doing the race that I did, which was the Pony Express 100. And I had fun. I paced for about 17 miles or so on that day. And I'm just like, this is the one I want to do. And so I think it was probably within the week. I don't know the exact date, but it was that October, within that week of pacing, I went back and just got it on the calendar. I mean, that's what they say to do, right? Whether you feel like you're ready or not, just get it scheduled. And so that's... So it was almost a year that I had to prepare for it.
Did you register within a week after you paced? Like, when did the actual register happen?
I don't remember the exact timestamp. It would be on my Instagram page, because I remember posting it saying that the deed is done. Yeah. It's out there. But I'm sure, I'm pretty confident it was right after that experience. So it would have been right toward the end of October of the previous year.
Yeah, to me, I find that impressive in itself, because I'm always I wait till the last possible minute to make the decision on the race. But you knew that's what you were going for. And so how did it feel when you clicked the spend my money? Yes, I do want to spend it. Boom, enter your credit card info, and there's no refund.
Final click.
It's done. It's terrifying, honestly. Like it's a tough click. Like your hand hovers over the mouse for a little while, and you're like,
bead of sweat.
Should I really do it? Yeah.
But
the advantage to doing it a year in advance is you get the cheaper price, right? Which is nice. So if you know you're going to do it, might as well just get in there and get the cheaper price anyway. But yeah, it was scary. I mean, I knew I had a year, but I also knew from the moment I clicked the mouse button that year would go really fast, and then all of a sudden the race would be here, and that's how it was. Like after a while, you're thinking, oh, I still got 10 months, I still got 9 months, still got, and so you set up a good training year, but at the same time, it's just like all of a sudden you find yourself thinking, I'm starting my taper for this thing, like it goes so fast. So even though it's a year out, you got to still have a plan. And wait till 2 months before to start thinking, I better train for this thing. Like you got to do it, from the moment you decide, you should start training.
Yeah, you don't want to fall into that trap like you mentioned of, I still have 10 months. I still have 9 months. I'll start training in a month. If you sign up for it, you are training right now.
Yep.
So speaking of training then, how did you plan out your training?
Well, I worked with Melody. She helped me create a really good plan just to keep the mileage up, and when we did some, we didn't, I guess maybe I wouldn't really call them some non-traditional things. Like, for example, I did the David Goggins 4x4x48 challenge twice during that year to kind of prepare for it, to kind of get used to running tired and running through the night.
Which I think everyone who is training for 100 should do.
Yeah, it's a terrible experience. Like, honestly,
Oh, yeah.
like it's not fun. Like, keep getting up at 1 a.m, and I chose to do some treadmill running at night just because it's just easier during the wee hours in the morning.
You don't get jumped.
Yeah, but just to get up out of bed, walk across the hall at 1 o'clock in the morning to run, and then to come back to lay down. You're maybe getting 2 hours of sleep at the most between those sessions. So, but that was a good training. Just like, you just got to do it, even if you don't feel like doing it, and that was good mental exercise.
Oh yeah, and for those of you who don't know the 4x4x48 challenge, what you do is you run 4 miles every 4 hours for 48 hours. So it's a really good mental toughness challenge, but you're able to take breaks and sleep in between, so your risk of injury is a lot lower.
Yeah, I find it impressive you did it twice in your leading up, because I've done that. Doesn't that mean you've done it 3 times total?
No,
it
was
both
twice.
times.
I did it like once in
Okay.
March and then once later in the summer.
Because I've only done that challenge once, and I've never gone back to it because of how miserable it was.
It's not fun. And the thing is, I think some people can, maybe their season in life will allow them to do that more than others. Like, it would be hard to do it if you had little kids and stuff, because you really kind of have to have the support of the family to to work around that. Like, you have to, when that clock hits, you got to be ready to run again, and you can't have distractions. And so it was just, I was at a good season in life where I could make that work. But it was a good exercise for me. And then, of course, just lots of running. And I think, so for those that haven't heard about the Pony Express, it literally follows the route of the old Pony Express route. It starts in Tooele County at a location called Lookout Pass, it's called, and then it goes out west, drops down, swings around through Simpson Springs, and then out over Dugway Pass, and then clear out to Fish Springs, which is way out in the desert. And so it's
basically where you go to dump a dead body.
Yeah,
they have found dead bodies out there.
It's a different type of environment, and beautiful in its own way, but it's flat. So I think ended up being almost 4,000 feet of vert. So, and that was just over the Dugway Pass part of it, but it was relatively flat. So you think about 4,000 over 100 miles, not a whole lot of elevation. And so that's where my focus was. As much as I love getting up in the hills, so I kind of focused on elevation in the beginning of the year, and I did some races that got me up into the trees and things. But then, really, once summer hit, like, it was just monotonous, flat training, and it was hard. Like, it was really hard. But I knew that's what the race was going to be.
Well, and you did a really good job at that. You spent a lot of time on the treadmill. You went out on, you did repeats, like 6-mile repeats on the same road.
Didn't you have a 1 mile
I had
repeat?
a 1 mile out and back, so 2 mile out and back that I did for 24 miles.
That's
just out and back.
Awesome. I'm really impressed how you mentally
and it's
prepared.
hard because you want to your mind wants that other stimulus of the scenery and the elevation and things, but it's just that I knew that's just what it was going to be. So and I also got I got me an Audible account, so I had some books on tape, and so I was really preparing for this long trek through the desert where you just go, you just set yourself and you just go. And I think that's really what helped me do this. And for those runners that have run flat and have also run mountainous terrain, that there's a difference. And I think that one of the biggest mistakes people make when they look at a race that's flat like this, thinking is, that'll be easy, right? Because it's just flat. You don't have to worry about so much elevation. But it does things to your body when you're running flat that it doesn't do that on elevation. Like the repetition on those parts of your body running flat are really hard. Like I've been more destroyed on flat races, hands down, than I ever have on high mountainous elevation races.
For sure. I was gonna say a flat run isn't easier; it's just different.
It's different.
The hard is different.
Yeah, and like I said, this race, as easy as it may sound to run flat, it has like about a 50% DNF rate, and so, I knew there was a high chance that I might not make it, but I just kept going. Yeah. And so, but yeah, so my training was, I guess my main message with the training was just train for the race that you're going to run. Whether it's a high mountainous, mountainous, a lot of elevation, or it's flat, that needs to be your focus, because that's what you're going to be out there doing for 30 hours, and you got to be ready for it.
And I'd just like to point out, you said that you did hills at the beginning of the year and then you transitioned to doing flat. And that's an important rule to follow in training, is you want to start with the least specific kind of training towards the beginning. And as you get closer to race day, that's when you want to transition to more specific training.
Right.
So speaking of those hills, though, leading up to your race, you had 2 races that ended in DNFs.
I know. So it was kind of a monumental year in a lot of ways. So I had my first 2 DNFs, and so I attempted this race here in Tooele County called Connor's Claims, and it's probably 9,000 feet, but it was a lot of elevation, not really great trails.
Yeah, pretty technical.
Very technical. And then it just so happened that we just got a soaking rainstorm that day. By mile 4 of that race, it was raining, like your rain gear didn't even stand a chance. Like it was just soaking wet. And then of course you climb up the elevation. And so by the time I got to like mile 7 or 8, now we climbed up to about 9,000 feet, and it was snowing. And so I was freezing. I didn't really have winter gear planned because it wasn't really I wasn't planning on snow. But every time you'd step, you'd go up past your ankles in mud, and it was snow. And so at the first aid station at mile 10, I made the call to just drop it out, because it was a sea race for me, and I was every step you took coming down those things, you'd slide 4 or 5 feet, and I'm just like, I was worried honestly about an injury, and so I had the 100-miler set in my mind, and I just made the conscious decision. I don't regret it. Like, it's always hard to take a DNF, but it wasn't my focus for that year, and so I didn't want to kill myself over something that was a sea race, right? Mm-hmm. And so I made that call to just do that, and I don't regret it. And I'm going to go back for redemption next year. I've already made that up, so that's going to be a focus. Connor's Claims, here I come. So be ready.
And just to clarify, because this is a podcast for beginners, right? So if you haven't heard of a sea race, in a year, in a season, you have your A races, your B races, and your C races. Your A race is your main goal. Your B races are kind of to prepare for your A race.
Races to help keep you motivated, to keep you in shape, to keep you running, even because the A race can be so far out sometimes.
And then your C races they're just basically they're basically training runs with aid stations.
Yeah.
Right. It just gives you the experience of doing a race. And so that was a 50K distance. And it's a beautiful area. Like, it's a beautiful race, and I'd really want to do it again. But it's a rocky area too.
And I think you made a really good call by dropping out of that race, because it was a sea race, and it wasn't super specific to your A race. It was lots of climbing instead of flat, and you didn't want to risk getting injured or sick. So right. I think that was a really good call. And honestly, on your A race, it's a different mentality. Like, if that's the one you've trained for all year, like, you just go out and do it regardless. Like, and if I have to crawl across, I'm going to crawl across the finish line. Right.
But in this case, I was just like, I just want to live to run another day. And so I had another race, which was technically my B race. It was a couple of months after that, which was the White Pine Solstice Run here, also in Tooele County. And this is kind of a behemoth of a 50K. It's a 13,000 foot. You've run it.
I call it Utah's hardest 50K.
Yeah, it was a challenge. I knew it would be a challenge. And not only is it 13,000 feet over the 55K, but it's very technical. Like, there's not a lot of great trail once you get up into you just run the ridges on these mountains.
Really hot too.
And the distance between aid up in the high country is like 13 and a half miles between aid stations.
So you're traveling like 4,000 to 5,000 feet over 13 miles with no aid.
Yeah.
It's tough. I ran it twice, and every time it's beat me up.
Yeah, it had like a 14 and a half hour cutoff for a 50K.
That was my A race this year.
Yeah. And the thing is I would have kept going. So I had made the decision, like I'm either gonna finish it or or I'll time out and I ended up missing a cutoff by about 20 minutes in the afternoon.
22 miles in.
Close. I'm almost approaching 23 miles, but it was the hottest time of the day, and I still had to go up 6,000 feet with the sun pounding on you. No aid. And
you've always struggled in the heat as well.
So he's been one of the hardest things for me to overcome.
That's kind of your kryptonite in running.
So that one, that race just flat out defeated me. And so, that DNF just had to happen. Like it stinks, but it defeated me. So that's another one I'm going to go back and try again. But I don't feel bad. Like those 23 miles that I got were great training, mental toughness training, just to keep going, and the heat training as well. But the heat's what really destroyed me that day. Like I was so overheated. And they did have some water drops, but by the time I got to them, the water was boiling from being in the sun all day. Like you can't cool down even with the water.
Yeah.
And that's what really got me.
And honestly, I was ahead of you. If you had kept going, that water drop that was set up at Bear Trap, there wouldn't have been any water left for you, because I got one of the last bit of water.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is there were some guys that just made out the cutoff just before me at that aid station, and they loaded up with everything they could carry, as much water as they could carry. And by the time they got back up to Bear Trap, which was just a few miles at that point, but it's all up.
It's like 3 or 4 miles.
They had already used every bit of water they had carried, and there was no water, and they still had
the major climb.
The
biggest climb of all was about after
So they
that.
turned around and dropped out. So it was not something I
so
I don't regret it. But anyway, it was good training.
Yeah.
But it kind of shows you the effort you put into a race, whether it's an A, B, or a C.
But did that rattle you at all, having 2 DNFs like in back-to-back months as you're leading up? Like, how did you, or did you just know that big picture, my real race is different?
Honestly, I don't know that it wouldn't. I think anybody would be rattled by that. Like I had never had a DNF before. I'd come close, but I'd always managed to kind of pull it out of the hat at the end of the day. But so it was a little bit tough, and I honestly took a little ding to my confidence there. Like if I can't even pull off these 50Ks, how in the world am I going to do 100 miles? Regardless of the terrain difference and things. And so I had to have something in between to kind of get my confidence back. And so at the last minute, I signed up for that Skyline 55K, which is in Ogden area. And that one about beat me to death, but I did finish it. that was a heat acclimation nightmare. And I know that this isn't about those races, but I just wanted to, but that gave me my confidence back. Like I came in probably one of the bottom last few people to finish, but I finished.
Yeah.
And that gave me my grit back, I guess.
I was just gonna say you needed that race, and as your coach, I was really happy that you got that heat training too, because that was something that I was really worried about going into Pony. It's in October here in Utah, but you don't know what the weather's going to be like. We don't know if it's going to be super hot. It could be super cold.
And this is an August race, so you pretty much know this is going to be nasty hot.
Yeah.
And what was it? It was about 7,000 or 8,000 feet of between you hitting like 2 peaks.
Yeah, you hit 2 peaks.
2 peaks on that one. It was 2 on that one. But that last 6 miles down to the finish was terrible. Like I really thought I was going to die, and I got down to that aid station, and I walked in, and they're all they came out. It was just like an oasis, like a beam of light shone on that thing, and they came out. But anyway, they had me. That was the first time I'd kind of lost it too. Like they gave me a popsicle, and I was like, oh, give me that popsicle, and I took one bite, and I'm like, now give me the garbage can. And I just sat there. I just dry heaved in the garbage can for like 10 minutes. Like it's the first time I'd ever just lost it like that. But I was in bad shape. Like I don't know if I could have. I had 4 miles to the end, and they were a long 4 miles.
But you mentioned how that was a confidence builder, and as like I've done this podcast and talked to all these first time 100-mile finishers, I've really come to realize there's a theme where something happens in their training where they might get rocked a little bit, whether it was a previous year DNF, but every training cycle needs to have that run where you, whether it's a race or a run, where you completely bonk, lose it, think you're going to die. but yet
Been there.
are able to then finish out those last, like what you did, those last 4 miles in the blazing 90+ degree heat in the middle of August, even though you've already ran 30 miles.
You prove to yourself that you can
Yes.
do it.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, there's just some mental boost that comes from that I feel like directly translates into every runner's 100-mile finish.
Well, and I kind of question now, like if I had DNF that race,
Yeah.
I may not have had the
Yeah.
courage to go on and do the 100.
'Cause in that-
We were saying lots of prayers for you for that
Yeah.
race. We were like, he
'Cause
needs this race.
That might have rattled me to the point where might have postponed that.
Yeah. To me, I see it like in that moment you proved, because you probably had heat exhaustion going
Yeah,
on.
absolutely.
Yes.
Probably the worst I've ever
But
had.
you proved in that moment that even though you had heat exhaustion going on, you could still move forward.
And I still ran over the finish. Like I got to the point I ran in the last half mile, and so yeah, you just do it. And I've never really cared so much about where I place. Like it's just this journey for me has been for me. Like it's nice to get faster and see progress and things, but it really is just about doing things for myself. Like I turned 52 this year. This was I tell everyone this was my midlife crisis. Instead of a sports car, I bought some running shoes, right? And it's been the best thing I ever did. Honestly, at least for my health, both mental and physical, and so it's been amazing. But anyway, but that kind of got me to August. Now I had till between August and October to really get dialed into this other race.
Yeah.
And so I knew the heat was going to be kind of my Achilles heel here, like that. And it is for a lot of people, but for me, I mean, you've been with me on races where I bonked out from heat too, like on my 50 miler that we did.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you go back and listen to your other two podcasts.
I was sick where I was shaking.
Yeah.
That's the condition I was in at that Skyline. But so I was working so hard. I got like ice packs, to put on my neck, and I got.
And I was pushing it a ton too. I was like, Dad, get out and train in the middle of the day. Like heat train.
I did all my training like during lunch breaks and stuff, so I could be out in the sun. And I tried different color clothing to see if the lighter clothing would help. I was trying everything that I could. And so that was kind of my big worry is the heat training. And so this is the other lesson that gets thrown at you, right? And all trail runners would agree with this. You can prepare and prepare and prepare and prepare. And then the day of the race, something happens.
Something always goes wrong on a 100-mile race. There's always going to be something that goes wrong or that you're not quite prepared for.
And by this, we were kind of watching the weather the week leading up. And so tell me what your thoughts started going to when you saw that winter decided to come on the day of your race.
Yeah, and this is not insignificant, because in a 20-year history of the Pony Express trail run, there's never been even so much as a raindrop. Like it's never even rained. The race director
so
said
we
no
were
storm.
sure that there wasn't going to be rain.
So honestly, half of me was thinking, okay, this isn't going to be that bad. Like how bad could it be? It's the middle of the desert. Like there's never been a storm on race day in this 20-year history of this race. And so I was optimistic that we'd be okay. Maybe it'd be
Mistake
cooler.
number one.
Yeah. Well, there was no mistakes because I was ready for it either way. I was ready for it either way. But the day of, it decided not only to rain, but it dropped 2 inches of snow at the start line.
We were driving through snow trying to get to the start
And it was like
line.
27 degrees.
Yeah.
In a desert.
And it was coming down hard, the snow at the start.
After heat training for months.
Yes. and so rather than starting with all of my heat acclimation tricks and things that I planned for all summer, I ended up putting on a stocking cap, coat, wool socks, gloves, long pants. And that honestly had me more nervous than the weather itself, because I hadn't trained in that gear.
Yeah.
Like I'm like, how are my feet gonna do at 100 miles in wool socks? Because and I was just like, what the heck, And when that gun sounded or whatever at 5 o'clock in the morning on that Friday, I remember just thinking, what have I got myself into? Like it was a storm. Yeah. It was a storm, like mud, sloppy mud, slushy everywhere, and so that first 12 miles was just raining and snowing. But so the nice thing is we were up at one of the higher elevation points. The start line is at a higher elevation, and then we drop about 1,100 feet before we get down to that Simpson Springs. And so as we went along, the storm let up. And so I think it was about mile 12 when I met you. So we had planned for Jacob to stop, for you to stop every 6 miles.
Yeah.
That was kind of, I found that over through my training, 6 miles was kind of my sweet spot
And
between aid.
And for those who are wondering, this race is totally kind of self-supported.
It's like a Ragnar format.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So it's on a dirt road, so you have to have your own crew. It's required. And you just work with your crew. Your crew just pulls to the side of the road. You get what you need, then the crew drives to the next spot. So yeah,
Right.
every 6 miles is what
And
we
so
were doing.
I had planned for that, and I knew from my races over the summer that was my sweet spot. Like anything over 6, I started to suffer. Anything, I could get to 6 and feel really good, and I could carry just enough supplies to feel good, water and so forth. So that's what we'd planned. So roughly every 6 miles. So by the time we got to mile 12, the rain had let up, and I kind of just did it. Everything I was wearing was just soaked, and so I did a full quick change right there on the road, ducking down behind the
I
car.
remember when you were changing, like you were handing me your clothes and it was just soaked, and I saw like your pants and things, and that's when I was like, geez, this has got to be tough. As you handed all your wet clothes over to me, I'm like, how is it this soaked already?
Yeah.
And I just want to clarify, this is just Jacob and Dad at this point.
Yeah.
It's just
Right.
been these two up until this
It was
point.
just basically Jacob and I for about the first 30 miles.
Yeah.
And so, but the nice thing is so once we got down to that point and the rain had stopped, temperature was still cold, but at least we weren't getting rained on. So I changed, and I actually stayed in those same clothes now for the rest of the race. I had brought a lot, so like I'm an overpacker, like over prepared. Like I had probably 5 pairs of shoes. I probably every pair of running shorts that I had, every pair of long pants I had.
Be an overpacker. It's better to be
Yeah.
an overpacker than an underpacker.
We had our friend Ryan Head came out. I'm getting ahead of ourselves here, but when he saw how much was in the car, he was like, was Mark preparing for the apocalypse or something?
Might as well have been. It felt like that. Might as well have been. But I just didn't know what I was going to need. So it's like
Especially
always have
with your
over.
first 100-mile race.
Yeah.
You just don't know.
It's I get you. I'm the same way.
So, but I'm glad I had the one change. I definitely changed out of my first pair of shoes and clothes, and was able to get dry. One of the nice things, and it's kind of funny, like things will happen to you that seem like it's the end of the world, but then when you look back retrospectively, it's like that actually was a blessing. That was a benefit, because one of the worst things about this race, and I know that from the previous year pacing, was the dust. Because out in the desert, because the cars are driving by to get their runners and things, and it's also trafficked by other people. It was the deer hunt, I think and so there's a lot of people going back and forth.
And
there's some crazy drivers. But
Oh
there's
my
always
goodness.
was this dust hanging in the air, like you're just breathing in this dust all the time, and like there was almost no dust this whole race because of that moisture that had just packed the roads down, and so that was a blessing. And so we didn't have to worry about that. Plus, it turned out I didn't really have to worry about heat acclimation. Like I don't think it really got much above freezing the whole time we were there,
I
but
think maybe like 33, 34
yeah, low
was the
30s.
high.
But that's a sweet spot for me. Like when I'm running, like it's cold when you stopped, but running, like it was really nice. Like I didn't overheat at all. I felt like my hydration went well. I felt like so that was the silver lining.
I guess the heat training was more for mental toughness.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, it could have easily been hot too.
70,
Like you
yeah,
had to
plus.
Prepare for that. But honestly, I find that I run really well in the 30s and 40 degrees. Like that's just kind of my,
Yeah.
I love those temperatures.
Now, as you start going on and getting into the meat of the race, I honestly started getting concerned about the weather, though, because there was this side wind. There was this brutal wind, probably like 30-mile-an-hour wind,
Brutal.
just going across the side of you. So I guess I'm glad that you weren't running into a headwind, but just that kind of wind beating on you in your eardrum all day can wear a person
It's a
down.
form of torture.
Yeah.
I feel like.
It is, and
you
honestly,
crazy.
that was looking back. That was probably the hardest part of the whole race for me, is just dealing with the wind. And that race continued the whole day up until like 11 p.m. that night, and it was just and depending on how there were some areas where we turned where we were running into it, and that's where it's hard when it's running right into. But you're right, just the noise of it and just the constant beating.
That's what I was
I had
gonna
the face
say.
mask and stuff, but still.
Yeah, you had to yell at each other to hear each other.
Yeah.
It was like being in a really loud, party where you have to scream to hear each other.
Yeah, so that was tough, but it's like it was tough, but I just knew the strategy that I had was just every 6 miles. Like I think that's one of the things that I did really well at, is not letting myself fall into that trap of, I still got 80 miles to go. I still got 60 miles to go. I got to get to the truck. 6 more miles. And that's how I did it. Like you just got to get to there. And then, and it's nice, you get to the truck, you can sit in there for a minute, get out of the wind just for a minute and just kind of recharge, eat some mashed potatoes. Mashed potatoes saved my life.
Instant mashed potatoes.
Oh my gosh, I love those things. I was eating those every stop. And we can talk about fueling in a second, but because I felt like that really went well. But that it was just that getting through those 6 miles, and I think that's what you have to do when you're doing any type of a long distance race. If you look at the overall picture, it's really easy to get discouraged, and if you just kind of take that next milestone, it's the same mentality you use to getting to where you're going to run a 100-mile race. Like I gotta get the 5K, the 10K, the half. You have to look at it that way, during the race, and set those milestones for yourself. And I never really looked beyond the 6 miles.
You did a great job at that. Where your brain was the entire race was basically perfect.
So speaking of that, yeah, I was very impressed with your mindset, and you did keep that every 6 miles mindset. Was there ever a moment of doubt? Or was the start line your biggest moment of doubt?
I probably had more doubt at the start with the storm than anything.
So for you, the finish before the finish line was the start line.
You just found your rhythm.
So if there was anything that I wish, I finished within 45 minutes of when I planned to. Like I wanted to do it in 28 hours, ended up being 28:46. So about roughly 45 minutes slower than I want it to be. And that's the only thing that I wish I would have done differently is knowing how much time that I had left. I probably could have pushed myself a little harder in those last few miles, but I was hurting pretty bad. But sometimes you kind of let yourself think, I'll still make it. Right, I'll still make it, and that's okay. But I kind of wished maybe I would just push through, because I ended up running in the last half mile, so I still had some gas in the tank.
And you jumped over the finish line.
Yeah, I have no idea what possessed me to do that.
The littlest bunny hop you've ever seen over the finish line.
I don't think I cleared like a half inch off the ground. But for me, that was just, I don't really feel like I doubted that I was going to finish. Once I reached that first point, I think the hardest part for me was the turnaround point. So it goes out to that 50-mile turnaround area, which was that Black Rock, and that's hard because that's where they have the food set up, and there's a big fire going there. And for the 50-mile finishers, that's where they finish and party and everything. But you still have to run off into the darkness.
I feel like that's kind of rude.
And
they should have another party at the finish line.
And then you have to go out, turn around, and you come back, and you got to see it again. And now
everyone's like eating their food, and you know that they're done,
and you got to just head out. Now it's pitch black, but the nice thing is by this time the wind had stopped, so that was a beautiful thing, and it cleared out, and this huge big moon came out. It was beautiful. But that's when my brother and my nephew had showed up, and I set off into the darkness with them, and they ran through the night with me. You mentioned Ryan Head. He came and ran. I think that was probably my hardest segment. It was between the Black Rock out to Fish Springs, which was the turnaround, and the coming back. That was probably the hardest segment for me.
I was so grateful when I saw Ryan Head. I was like, you got here at the perfect time.
Yeah, just having that extra motivation, and that was really needed. So the first 30 miles, I felt like I did pretty. They were pretty eventless. Like you just every 6 miles, and we're done. And then you and Ashley showed up. And paced me for up until Black Rock, which was awesome.
Ashley's my sister.
Yeah.
Dad's daughter.
Yep. And so you guys got me over the Dugway Pass and down into to that Black Rock area.
And that's when we experienced that wind just for a short amount of time, and I was going crazy after running
you guys
for a few hours.
And then that's when Ryan showed up. I actually had started out running solo, and I made it about 3-4 miles, and then he showed up, and because it's a trek out there. I think it surprises people how far west it is out on those dirt roads. It's like you just never feel like you're going to get there. But he showed up and he got me through the turnaround and back, and that was the hardest part for me, because that was the first actual cutoff of the race. It was like 10 p.m.
And that's like
cutoff.
48 48 through like 68.
So it was close to mile 70 when we got back to the big fire.
Which those are always the hardest miles in any 100-mile race, in my opinion.
And then you got 30 miles left. Now it's all dark. You got to go back up over the pass. That was the only really elevation in there. And so there was just a lot of power hiking. That's when I grabbed my trekking poles and just kind of power hiked a lot of that through the night.
And that's when your nephew and your brother showed up and helped pace you through the night.
Yeah, and it was awesome. Like, it was beautiful. Like, once the wind had stopped, like, it was very pleasant. Like, it was still cold, but just having that wind stop was just almost a miracle in and of itself.
Yeah. And then and then from there, I brought you in like the last 12 miles or so at that point. So I was just honestly, like I've said this before, so impressed with your just resilience to just keep moving. What do you think made that possible for you to have that mindset coming into the race? Because it was obvious that something had happened before the race where you have already chosen to have this mindset. Because with me, and what I've seen with a lot of people, is they get to that mile 60, 70 point and I'm done. I always get to that point and I just think I'm done. I want to quit, and I start vocalizing. I start telling people I want this to be over. I don't think I can do it.
Mentally.
Yeah, I start to mentally spiral. But you never mentally spiraled, because I kept waiting. And even Melody, when I got reception, she's texting me and I'm like, yeah, he's doing great. But, I'm just waiting for the low to hit. That's what I call it, for the low to hit. What kept that off for you? How did you keep the low away?
Honestly, I wish I could tell you. Like, I really don't know. Like, I just knew what I wanted to do, and I just knew I had to go every 6 miles. And I just I wasn't going to come that far to not finish. And I've been talking this thing up, and I think that's one of the strategies too. Like, talk this up, tell your friends, tell your people you're doing this, and get it out there, because it's like it adds a little bit of like pressure. Like, I got people that are waiting at this finish line for me. I got people that are waiting to hear
that's
how I do.
why we did a podcast for our first 100. We told the whole world.
but really, it's just like that was my goal for the last year. Like, and I at that point, you're within 30 miles of this thing, right? 20 miles or whatever it is, and I can't say that I had no low spots, because my lowest spot was probably in the morning when we had the big storm. But then another one was just that the last 6 miles were very hard, because it is a stretch that just goes as far as your eyes can, right to the horizon almost. Like,
Jacob thought this part was hilarious.
Oh, it is funny. Part. So this is where I just started to complain a little bit, because this
is the first complaining I'm really.
So like in the last 6 miles, and it's just because my feet were just so destroyed. Like, it's just this gravel road the whole time, but every step felt like I was stepping barefoot on Legos at that point. Like, I didn't have blistering or anything. I think that as a testament, I picked the right shoes and training, and the wool socks didn't tend to didn't do me any harm. But anyway, it's just the wear and tear on my feet was just starting to hurt, and it just out of steam. At this point, I've been running 27 hours, and I did start to have some weird little like hallucination stuff going on. Like, you hear about this, nothing like major, but just kind of more funny than anything. Like, I remember coming over the pass that night with my nephew, and I swore I saw a sheep, like, off the side of the road, just grazing in the grass. And I'm like, look at that sheep. You see that sheep over there? And my nephew just kind of looked back over me like, no, and we get up there and say, oh, it's just a rock, huh? He's like, yeah, it's just a rock. Like, he didn't know what I was seeing. But then I would see random vehicles, like a vehicle would be waiting for a runner, and I would get up there and there would just be nothing there. I'm like, there was a car here, like, waiting for a runner. Like, I could picture his lights on and everything. Like, he was waiting here, and there was no car. But anyway, so we got to that last 6 miles, and it was just one of those things where it's like, we would move for a half hour, and that's where we were doing our thing, like, let's walk for a couple minutes and run for a few minutes, walk for a couple minutes and run for a few minutes. And it's like we never got any closer. Like, I just started remember complaining to Jake. I'm like, what the heck? Like, we're no closer than we were a half hour ago. And I was just starting to get mad.
You're like, is this a nightmare?
It's like, what's happening? It's like a dream. Like, it's like, and I remember there was a person I was watching that was ahead of me. And they were going, there's a little incline at the very end, and they were going up the hill, and I swear like 15 minutes had passed, and they were in the same spot on the hill. I'm like, they're not even halfway up the hill. They've been on the halfway up the hill for 20 minutes. And so I was just getting all mad and just like, we're never going to get there, never going to get there. And then, of course, you get to the end, and there's a guy taking pictures, I think, for the race.
Yeah.
We're the guy, and he's like, it's just up the hill. And then, of course, there's one of those hills that goes up, and then it goes up again, and it goes up again, and then up again. And you're like, come on. All the false peaks or whatever. But but we finally made it. But the last 6 miles were the hardest part, just because I was just honestly just hurting at that point. My quads were hurting.
It's probably because you knew you were almost there too.
Right. And this was like, I've got to get there, and it's just right around the corner. And I knew that people were there, and it was, so I don't know. It was just, that was a long 6 miles. That made the last 6 miles of that Skyline race look like nothing. And they were my previously longest 6 miles.
Yeah.
But
oh no, I thought it was hilarious when you were, because here's the thing, what you were saying, it was absolutely true. That person on that hill literally did not look like they were moving. And we did not look like we were getting any closer to that hill.
When you can see that kind of a distance, it's different than when you're like in the trees, like
10 miles out in front of you.
Or you at night you'll see like car tail lights or whatever up there, and it's like it feels like you're right behind them.
Yeah.
And then you realize you're still probably 2 miles away from them. Like the depth perception and the gauging the distance was really weird in that environment where it's just dark and it's flat, like your mind just plays tricks.
It just, with those tricks and with the wind, I just feel like the mental toll that race can take on someone.
Well, it's interesting. Like I've run into some really neat people as I was running, and had a chance to talk with some folks, and I ran into a really nice lady that had run the race 7 times. Before, and she's like, I'm going for the Queen of the Pony Express. She told me, and this was her 8th time. And she said, the only other person that's ever run it that many times was the race director. Yeah. And so I'm like, well, you got it. Like, you've done it 7 times, right? And unfortunately, she ended up DNFing the race. And it's like, so it just kind of goes to show you, and it's a good lesson. Like, every time you run a race, it's unique, right? Mm-hmm. You may have done it 7 times, but that 8th time, she probably never faced it with the kind of wind and the storm that was there. I mean, who knows? I mean, I don't know what the cause was.
And lots of things could happen. You could just have a bad day. You could have gut issues. Whatever it is. And so it's just, you just never know. Like, you prepare the best you can, but then you just have to be ready for whatever comes your way. But it's interesting. There were 22 of us that finished, I think, out of 49 that signed up. And so I think I came in, number 18 out of the 22. But it was awesome. Like, crossing that finish line was one of the peak moments of my life. Yeah, honestly.
What was that like?
It was emotional. Like, I just, having the family and everyone there that had come to see me cross the finish line, it was just amazing. Like, I kind of feel like it's going to be like that at the end of this life, when we're done with this life and we cross over whatever we cross over to. And there's going to be people there, and there's going to be hopefully a huge sense of accomplishment, and like, yeah, it was hard, but I got here, right? And that's what's nice. That, it doesn't matter what place you finish in life; it's just a matter that you finish, and you have dignity while you do that, and you push as hard as you can, and learn what you can, and do the best that you can. That's really what it's about, and I think that's that kind of that symbolism of long distance running and just life is really a big, strong pull for me, because I just look at everything through that lens, right? I just got to keep going, whether it's running,
one aid station at a time,
whether you're going to school, whether you have, you're trying to progress at work. Like, it's just that mentality that holds true to whatever you're doing in life. Get to the next 6 miles, get to the next milestone.
Amen. Now, I want to ask Jacob what Dad's finish line experience was like for you.
Ooh, I'm gonna cry, because everything you said, Mark, was true. And it's funny because I've only known you for 7 years of your 52 years, but in that moment, I remember having almost all those same thoughts that you just vocalized. And we didn't even we weren't talking about it. We weren't really even talking much at this point, because I think we both were
were feeling the emotions and the realness of it all. And I remember we finally got to that top of that precious hill that
was
you were
awesome.
so mad at, and it was like a quarter mile down or so.
Yeah.
We could see the whole family at the finish line, and so we start right when we got to that top. I felt like, and probably was some wind, but I felt like this rush of wind, but it felt like more than a wind, if that makes sense. And I just got chills. And so we start running down that, and I just feel this wind and these chills start to come over me. And, you talk about it kind of being like life. 100-mile race was like life. And in my head, I felt like people from the other side of the veil were there, that they people that loved you, people who have passed on, that they came and were there. And
I felt that as well.
yeah, it felt so special to be able to just feel that, and to know that you were so loved, and that like, life is hard, and I know you've been through a lot, and
everybody has their
everybody
battles.
does. Everybody goes through a lot of stuff, and I feel like it was like everyone being like your physical family that's here, as well as your family that might not be physically here. We're there to cheer you on and say, we love you, Mark. Way to go. This was amazing. Not only what you did in this race, but how you've just made it to this point in your life. So.
Well, awesome. No, it was an amazing experience. And it's like, I mean, and the other thing that I just want to make sure everybody is aware of, when you do this, like, it's a team effort.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a race I couldn't do on my own, because there's no aid stations. Like, you rely on the crew chief and your pacers to be there at that 6 miles. And I remember there was a time running up that pass where Melody was just like, open up. And she would just cram a handful of potato chips in my mouth. Like they were, I mean, I was well taken care of. Like, I mean, so it was me running the race, of course, but there was a lot more to it than that. And so I think that you make sure that you have appreciation for those that sacrifice their time and effort to make that happen, because those crew chiefs and those pacers and those people that help, they're needed. I mean, and again, that's the metaphor in life as well. Like, we have friends, we have neighbors, we have family that help us. We have those aid stations in life that we desperately need, and when nobody does it alone, right? Nobody does it alone. You have to be the one to say, I'm going to take the step, but there's people there to help.
Yeah, you have to take the step, but there's others there to help you out.
And so I think that's just been the most amazing kind of aha moment for me. But it's like, you just don't do it alone. And so, like, people are asking me, are you doing another one next year? And I'm like, well, probably not next year, because I don't want to ask that again of the family and friends. I'm gonna try to support and give back a little bit this next year, and help maybe do some pacing and some crewing myself, maybe do some volunteering, and maybe focus on some shorter distances. So, so I think you kind of have to take that into account. That it's not just you committing to it when you do this kind of stuff. It's a larger commitment by others as well.
I think that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it was just an amazing. I know you had a great experience, but that was one of probably my top favorite moment with you, was being out there and seeing you go from mile 0 to mile 100. And
Jacob had the privilege to be there the entire time, from start to finish.
Yeah,
and
it's just, if you want to bring your family together, then have someone run 100 miles and get the family to crew.
That's our new family tradition. We're gonna have one person run 100 every year.
You see people that they're probably most raw and most vulnerable. And,
And it was so cool, that kind of race where you can see the runners, because sometimes in mountain races, you don't see the runner for like 30 plus miles or so, because their aid stations aren't crew accessible or whatever. But that one, like, just seeing everyone else.
Every step of the
Yeah,
way.
and then also
Yeah.
seeing the other runners, I felt like I was getting to know the other runners and their crew, and seeing their families support them.
You had
I
little
was like,
kids. You had little kids running
yeah.
with their dad. And
Yeah.
their mom.
I
It
was like,
awesome.
this is what life's about, like right here, like families supporting each other, family and friends helping one another out to achieve their goal. So I feel like that race really embodied that
Yeah,
spirit.
so I would just say if you've never thought about Pony Express because it's just a long, boring, flat race, I would say reconsider it because it's its own challenge and it's its own reward.
You know, I kind of made fun of you throughout the year for choosing
We
this
both
race.
did.
Yeah, but after being out there with you, I think it's an awesome race, and I would love, you know, maybe for that to even be my first official, you know, quote unquote official 100-mile race one day.
I
But
know.
it's an awesome race.
I'm already going to be out there next year. I got messages from a buddy that had run it. That's going to attempt it again next year, and he's like, I'm already on deck to pace, so I'll be
Heck
out there
yeah.
again in October,
Heck
one way or
yeah.
another.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about.
Well, Mark, before we let you go, we have to ask you the question we ask all 100-mile finishers. After having this, your first time experience, what would you think your top piece of advice would be to someone who wants to run 100 miles?
I think this answer's been given before, but it's consistency. Run the race that you're train for the race that you're running is my first piece of advice. But then just get out there and do it. Get the miles in. Like you have to get the base in. So whatever that is, decide how many miles you're going to run a week and just get them in. Whether you have to do some on the treadmill, some on the road, some on the trail, get your miles in, get your body conditioned to just be able to take the abuse. And the only way you get it that way is you just get out there and do it.
And I just have to say this. I made you was it a 20-week plan?
16 weeks.
16-week plan, and you followed it almost perfectly. I think
a
there were
couple
like
little
1 or
variances.
2 days that you missed.
I always tried to make up
Something like
if I missed any miles, I always tried to make them up in the next few days.
And that's the thing. You followed the plan perfectly, and that I was super impressed by that.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it was a good plan. You just have to create a plan and stick with it. Sometimes I think it's less about what the plan consists of and more just about doing it. Whatever it is you're going to do it. And just don't let yourself slide and don't miss those long runs.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. And anyways, Mark, it was a pleasure to be out there with you. It was a pleasure
Absolutely. It
to
was awesome.
sit down and recap it with you, and I look forward to many more running adventures.
Oh
with
yeah,
you.
2025 is going to be awesome.
If people want to follow you, learn more about you,
Or
reach out to you, where can they find you?
Yeah, the best way is just I do have an Instagram page. It's just Kenpo Runner, KENPO Runner.
Like on our hats. I don't know if you can
Kenpo
see him
runner.
here on YouTube.
He is the Kempo runner. You also teach karate.
I teach Kenpo Karate. Been doing that for like 39 years. So that's my other passion. So I thought it'd be fun to
He's
combine
an
the
8th
two.
degree
and-
black belt. So
Yeah.
he can kick your butt. He can run away from you and also kick your butt. So
Oh, he can chase you down
Yeah.
and kick your butt.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of my little motto on the page: run when you can, fight if you have to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I
love it. Well, thank you, Mark, and we look forward to talking to you again at some point.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on.
Running 100 miles seems impossible, and maybe even kind of crazy. And it is, but we believe in big crazy dreams. That's why we ran 100 miles. It was such a life-changing experience for us, we decided to devote this podcast to preparing and inspiring you to run your first ultra race.
Are you ready to feel the highest highs and the lowest lows? Are you ready to do what you once thought was impossible? Are you ready for your trail to 100?